You have just finished buttoning your shirt and checking the time when your phone lights up with the message you secretly hoped to see. The friend who was supposed to meet you downtown has canceled because of a last-minute work deadline. You type back a polite reply expressing disappointment, yet inside something loosens. The evening that stretched ahead like an obligation suddenly opens into possibility. You slip off the shoes that pinch, pull on soft cotton pants, and settle into the corner of the sofa with a book you have been meaning to finish for weeks. The kettle begins to murmur in the kitchen. No one needs you to perform, to laugh on cue, or to fill silences with acceptable chatter. The relief arrives not as laziness, but as a quiet return to yourself. This reaction is common for people who genuinely prefer staying home, and it has nothing to do with disliking others or fearing the world. It reflects a different way of processing experience. Society often treats the desire for solitude as a problem to be fixed, yet research in personality and neuroscience shows that a meaningful portion of the population is simply wired for lower external stimulation. Their nervous systems register subtle signals more intensely, and their inner landscapes already contain enough richness to feel satisfying. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is often careful stewardship of limited energy. Consider how the brain manages its baseline level of alertness. Some people begin the day with a relatively low level of cortical arousal. Their minds feel understimulated without outside input, so they naturally seek noise, movement, and social exchange to reach a comfortable state. Others start closer to an optimal level already. Additional stimulation quickly pushes them past that point into discomfort. The first pattern describes many extroverts. The second fits those who love staying home. Neither is better, but they require different environments to function well. Picture the difference as two glasses of water. For the extrovert, the glass sits low. Every conversation, every new sight, every burst of music adds a little more until the level feels right. For the person who prefers home, the glass is already near the top. A lively gathering adds so much that the water spills over the rim. That overflow registers as tension in the body, racing thoughts, or a strong urge to leave. The same environment that fills one person leaves the other drained. This difference shows up in everyday choices. An extrovert might look forward to a crowded concert because the collective energy raises their arousal to a pleasant peak. Someone with the opposite wiring may enjoy the music yet feel exhausted afterward because their system has been bombarded. They are not weaker or more sensitive in a fragile sense. They simply register more of what is happening around them. One drop of lemon juice on the tongue produces a stronger saliva response in this group, a classic demonstration that their sensory systems amplify input rather than dampen it. The brain chemistry involved adds another layer. Extroverts often respond strongly to dopamine, the neurotransmitter tied to novelty and reward from outside sources. Home lovers tend to experience more pleasure from acetylcholine, which supports calm focus and sustained attention. A long evening alone with a complex novel or a quiet project can therefore feel genuinely rewarding rather than like a second choice. The satisfaction comes from depth rather than volume. Over a typical week, these patterns compound. Someone who attends 3 evening events may return home each night with an energy account that is deeply overdrawn. The next morning requires extra effort just to reach baseline. In contrast, a person who declines 2 of those events and spends the time reading or walking alone may wake with reserves intact. They are not avoiding life. They are allocating a scarce resource so they can engage more fully when they do choose to step out. The cost of constant social performance is easy to underestimate. Every casual question at a party demands a quick calculation of how much to reveal, how warmly to smile, and how long to linger before moving on. These micro-decisions accumulate into cognitive load. After a few hours, the mental fatigue feels physical. Home removes that load almost entirely. There is no audience to manage, no script to follow, and no need to monitor whether you are being sufficiently entertaining. The nervous system can shift from vigilance into restoration. That restoration matters for creativity. When the mind is not occupied with external demands, it enters a mode where memories, feelings, and half-formed ideas begin to connect. Solutions that remained hidden during busy hours often surface during simple tasks like folding laundry or standing in the shower. The process is not mystical. It is the brain performing maintenance, linking information that had been stored in separate compartments. People who protect time at home give this network more opportunities to operate. The same principle applies to emotional clarity. Difficult feelings rarely resolve while someone is surrounded by noise and new faces. They tend to untangle when the environment is stable and the pace is self-determined. A quiet living room can become the space where someone finally understands why a certain relationship has felt draining or why a career move no longer fits. The insight arrives not because the person forced it, but because nothing else was competing for attention. Society often frames the choice to stay home as missing out, yet many people who love solitude practice a different stance. They notice how much of the social world is driven by fear of missing something rather than genuine desire. They learn to distinguish between events that would genuinely enrich them and events that simply promise distraction. This distinction protects their time for activities that actually replenish rather than deplete. Relationships look different under this approach as well. Instead of maintaining a large circle of loose acquaintances, many home lovers invest in a smaller number of deeper bonds. A single evening with one friend who can sit in comfortable silence or explore a meaningful topic can feel more satisfying than a dozen superficial gatherings. The quality of attention matters more than the quantity of contacts. Over years, this selective investment tends to produce relationships that withstand distance and change. Work life also shifts when someone understands their own wiring. Remote or hybrid arrangements often suit this temperament because they reduce the daily drain of open offices and constant interruptions. The same person who struggles to focus in a noisy cafe may produce exceptional work during a focused morning at the kitchen table. Employers who recognize this pattern gain access to steady, thoughtful contributions rather than forcing every employee into the same social mold. The practical challenge is learning to set boundaries without apology. Many people who prefer home still feel pressure to accept every invitation or to explain why they are declining. A simple statement such as needing a quiet evening works better than elaborate excuses. Over time, the people who matter adjust their expectations, and the requests that truly require presence stand out more clearly. There is also a quiet form of courage involved. Choosing to spend an evening alone in a culture that equates busyness with importance can feel countercultural. Yet the long-term effects on mental health and creative output are often substantial. People who regularly protect solitude report lower anxiety, clearer thinking, and a stronger sense of identity. They are less likely to absorb other people's moods or to chase trends that do not align with their values. The opposite pattern carries its own risks. Constant external stimulation can leave little room for the internal processing that turns experiences into wisdom. Someone who moves from one event to the next may accumulate stories, yet struggle to articulate what those experiences meant. The home lover's slower pace allows meaning to settle. None of this suggests that staying home is always the right choice or that solitude is superior to connection. The healthiest approach for most people involves a balance that respects their natural range. For those whose range favors lower stimulation, honoring that preference is not retreat, it is calibration. Consider what becomes possible when someone stops treating their preference for home as a flaw. They begin to design evenings that genuinely restore them. They might cook a favorite meal while listening to music at a comfortable volume, spend an hour on a project that requires sustained attention, or simply sit with a notebook and let thoughts arrive without agenda. These activities are not empty time. They are the conditions under which their particular mind does its best work. Over months and years, the cumulative effect is a life that feels more coherent. Decisions align more closely with actual capacity. Relationships receive the quality of presence they deserve. Creative or intellectual interests have space to deepen. The person who once felt vaguely guilty for declining invitations now recognizes that choice as an investment in the quality of their attention. The world will always offer more events, more noise, and more demands on time than anyone can meet. The people who love staying home have simply learned to answer that abundance with a clear internal filter. They ask whether a given activity will leave them more alive or less. When the answer is less, they stay in. The evening unfolds at their own rhythm. The book opens. The kettle sings. The mind, finally unhurried, begins to wander where it needs to go. To understand this wiring more precisely, it helps to look at how stimulation actually accumulates across a single day. Imagine tracking stimulation in simple units. An extrovert might begin the morning at roughly 30 units out of a comfortable 100. A team meeting adds 20, a lunch with colleagues adds 15, and an after-work gathering adds another 25. By evening, their total reaches 90, which feels lively and satisfying. The same day for someone who prefers home might start at 75 units. The same meeting adds 20, lunch adds 15, and the gathering pushes them well past 110. What felt energizing to one person registers as overload to the other. This daily accounting explains why the same social calendar can produce opposite outcomes. One person returns home ready for more connection. The other returns home needing several hours of silence before they feel like themselves again. Neither outcome is wrong. They simply reflect different starting points and different tolerances for additional input. The same principle appears in how people recover from demanding periods. After a particularly intense week, an extrovert might plan a weekend of dinners and outings to recharge. Someone with the opposite preference might plan a weekend of reading, long walks, and early nights. Both strategies can restore energy, yet they look completely different from the outside. Recognizing this difference reduces the pressure to copy someone else's recovery method. Many people who love staying home also discover that their preference influences how they handle conflict or difficult conversations. They often prefer to process emotions privately first before discussing them. A quiet evening allows the necessary reflection. A rushed conversation in a noisy setting rarely produces the same clarity. This is not avoidance. It is matching the method of resolution to the way their nervous system works best. The preference for home also shapes how people experience travel. Some travelers thrive on packed itineraries and constant new encounters. Others find that one carefully chosen destination with plenty of unstructured time brings far more satisfaction. They return home not exhausted, but quietly enriched. The difference is not about the destination itself, but about how much external input their system can comfortably absorb. Over time, these patterns influence larger life decisions. People who prefer home often gravitate toward careers, living arrangements, and social circles that allow them to control the volume of stimulation. They may choose neighborhoods that are quieter, roles that involve deep focus rather than constant collaboration, or friend groups that value meaningful conversation over frequent gatherings. These choices are not limitations. They are optimizations that allow their particular strengths to flourish. The strength most often overlooked is the capacity for sustained attention. In a world full of notifications and quick hits of information, the ability to remain with one task or one thought for an extended period becomes increasingly rare. People who protect time at home cultivate this capacity naturally. They can read a long book, follow a complex idea, or work through a creative problem without the constant pull of external novelty. This skill compounds across years and often becomes a quiet competitive advantage in fields that reward depth. Another overlooked strength is emotional self-sufficiency. Because their sense of well-being is less dependent on constant external validation, they tend to weather periods of isolation or change with greater stability. When social opportunities decrease, as they did during the pandemic, many home lovers actually reported feeling more at ease than they had in years. The external world had finally matched their internal preference. Of course, this temperament also brings challenges. The most common one is the need to explain or defend the choice to stay in. Friends and family may interpret it as disinterest or even rejection. Learning to communicate the reason clearly and kindly reduces friction. A simple phrase such as, "I need some quiet time to recharge," usually lands better than silence or vague excuses. Over repeated interactions, most people come to understand and respect the boundary. Another challenge involves finding enough high-quality connection. Because home lovers tend to invest in fewer relationships, they can sometimes feel the absence of casual social touchpoints. The solution is not to force more shallow interactions, but to deepen the existing ones. Scheduling regular, unhurried time with the people who matter most often provides the sense of belonging without the overload. The preference for home is also not static. Stress, age, health, and life circumstances can shift someone's tolerance for stimulation. What felt manageable in one's 20s may feel draining in one's 40s. Paying attention to these shifts and adjusting accordingly prevents unnecessary exhaustion. The core wiring remains, but the amount of external input someone can comfortably handle may change. Ultimately, the people who love staying home are not opting out of life. They are opting into a particular quality of life. They are choosing presence over performance, depth over breadth, and restoration over constant stimulation. In a culture that often equates movement with progress and noise with vitality, this choice stands as a quiet form of self-knowledge. It says that one's own nervous system is worth listening to and worth protecting. The evening that opens after a canceled plan is not an empty space. It is a space that has been reclaimed for the kind of living that actually sustains them.